Welcome to Switching On Electrified Skills, the podcast that sparks your curiosity and ignites your passion for a career in electrification. I'm Deepak Farmer. Join me on this electrifying adventure where I connect you with industry leaders, visionary education providers, and pioneers driving the electric revolution. Discover the world of skills, jobs, and community, gaining actionable insights, inspiring stories, and the latest developments.
I'm joined today by a very interesting guest today. We've got Claire Murphy, Lead Project Manager at InnoEnergy Skills Centre, who will be joining us today to talk about some of the work that she's been doing around using technology and supporting, learning and development. And also really interesting in the side that, most of your career you've spent in US. So looking at the sort of comparative nature of what's been happening in the US and looking at the comparisons to the UK. So welcome, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
As I mentioned, there's, so much that you have to offer today. So I'm really looking forward to explore that with you today. If we start off with a little bit about, InnoEnergy Skills Centre first, in terms of where you are now and your role there. What is the work that you're doing now, and how is that working in terms of supporting the people and individuals around obtaining skills and being part of new technologies?
Yeah. So the InnoEnergy Skills Institute is, it's kind of the Skills Institute is a group within an InnoEnergy, which is focused on driving the transition to net zero, right? By finding innovative solutions in battery, solar, and hydrogen. The Skills Institute is focused on the people who are going to do those jobs and making sure that they are skilled or reskilled or upskilled and able to adapt and drive the global transition to net zero.
So much in line with some of the work that we've been doing around the Electric Revolution Skills Hub and trying to support that ecosystem of growth and that sort of growth in talent pools available to industry and businesses. But if we go back to some of your work that you've been doing, if we start about your journey and how you've ended up here, and the work that you're doing, we talked about, the starting in teaching and some of the things you've done in the US. Where did that journey start for you? Why this space? Why was that important to you?
I think learning has always been important to me. I like to learn new things, right? I like to learn new and interesting facts and go down rabbit holes in research, and always have. And look as learning is something that's lifelong. It's not something that just happens in K-12 or K-16. And so I just kind of fell into education because of a love of learning, and then ended up working on the cutting edge, like in the middle of the dot-com boom, working for Princeton Review as we rolled out online formative assessment, right? So using assessment to inform education, to determine where people still need to learn more. What kind of support do they do? And that, just sort of brought together this love of learning, and then the ability to learn while helping others learn, learning about new technology, about new ways to reach students. And so I stayed in K-12 in that area until about 2017, worked at Pearson, and ran these really large statewide assessment programs, like ginormous statewide assessment programs. That was a lot of project management, kind of got removed from the learning, right? It sort of stepped back a bit from the learning and was more on the technology or the infrastructure to support learning. And then in 2017, a guy, the man who had started the Princeton Review, John Katzman, he's like an entrepreneur, an educational entrepreneur in America. Everybody knows who he is. He started the Princeton Review. He had made the leap into higher ed and bringing that same technology, that same innovation into the higher education space, and started the company, which was one of the first ones to bring a master's degree online at USC. And by the time he and I got reconnected, he was doing the same thing, but in a very small consultative level, really focused on the learning, building engaging learning so that people want to learn. And so I had this really nice opportunity to dive back into learning and bring together love of learning and love of operations and scaling huge projects. And, the pandemic happened and all kinds of things happened. And I find myself in the United Kingdom with this unusual set of skills, right? Large scale formative assessment, learning, skill development. And this opportunity came up at InnoEnergy to use all of that to help in a really meaningful way, right? To help the transition to net zero, to help people turn lifelong learning into a meaningful lifelong career.
And, over time, having been a teacher myself, time, the way that people learn has very much changed. I feel like, there was a time where, institutions and organizations sort of had a entry and exit point of learning that was quite sort of dictated rather than a thing. And now we know that, it's about the individual's path. They want to pick and choose at what point they enter and exit, and things are evolving, and technology is helping us do that. But still, when somebody is learning, they are very positive at the end when they've learned it and they can apply it and they can use it. But there's still a barrier they have to get over in terms of trying to even engage with learning or saying, can they do it? What have you seen in terms of your viewpoint change over the years in terms of how that behavior, right, of somebody who, finds it hard to say, like, for example, you said, I like to learn. Many are not there yet in terms of...
I didn't say that when I was 18, right? Or when I was 20.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I liked to learn. In fact, I thought I hated to learn. I thought I hated school. Because I was stuck in that little, and just like you said, a lot of people who do like to learn, they don't know that they do because they're pigeonholed into this very structured system. And so I think that's the biggest change. And that's the biggest, I was talking with a colleague yesterday, we were, people are afraid of AI. Don't even talk about AI. And I don't know enough about it. But to me, the potential of truly personalized learning, right, where you're not held back because others don't understand, or you're not, expected to move forward without a grasp. That's very exciting to me, the idea of using that. And I think the other big change is around skills, that a university education is important for many, but maybe it's not the path for all. But skill development is something that can happen your whole life. It's not something that just has to happen in the confines of a school or an institution. And so I think that's really exciting too.
It's really exciting. And what are you doing in that space at the moment? So if we got into some of the detail around, the activities that you're doing, right, to support that sort of move for accessibility, support, diversity, inclusion, because there are many people out there that are stuck in jobs that they've sort of been shoehorned into for various different forms of their life, whether it's financial need, family need, and, they still have skill sets that I think are very important in the technology world that we're in. We're trying to build, thousands and thousands of people here, to support electrification, net zero, carbon, all the things that, we've been set targets for from a governmental perspective. And these people got to come from somewhere. I feel that the people are there, but sometimes the barriers are there. What work are you doing in terms of, your organization to support them, right, in trying to access these, prosperous careers, you could say?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And, I'll give the caveat, again, that I'm fairly new at InnoEnergy, fairly new to the United Kingdom in general. And I do have a lot of experience with, trying to wrangle large 50 states onto, a one set of standards or things like that. And I think the thing that's most important, and what the Skills Institute is really focused on right now, is we have to do it collaboratively and in partnership. We all have to work together. Education, industry, government, business. And so that, to me, is something that is key and really important. Like the work you're doing is bringing everyone together to say, okay, what are the jobs? What do we need to do? because that's what it's all about, right? Training is a little bit different than education, right? It's still education and learning, whereas training is more about what are we going to do? What do we have to know how to do? And so that's the work that I'm excited about, is working with, in collaboration, to identify what do people need to know how to do to be successful at the beginning of their career. Once they're in it and they need to be reskilled or upskilled, what are the paths? We partner with learning partners like NIIT, who are going to help us reach out and deliver all of our solutions. We partner with different, the European Battery Alliance, to understand more about what do we need to know. I'm not an expert in batteries or green energy. I know learning design. So we have to work together, and everybody has to bring their skills and talents together in order for us to reach our goals. So I think that's the exciting work that we have available to us at the Skills Institute, is being able to take all of that learning knowledge, all of the viewpoints and input from the community, and then say, okay, what do we need to do, and move it forward, right? One little bit at a time.
And how are you finding that ecosystem, with the collaborations? Are you seeing a bigger willingness, right, from the other organizations? Because, to collaborate, you've got to have almost joint goals, joint objectives. How are you finding that ecosystem in terms of the people that you're wanting to bring as part of the conversation around the table? Right. How are you finding that?
I mean, so far, everyone that I've spoken to, and all the research I've done, is that there is a strong desire to collaborate. Nobody really wants to reinvent the wheel in any shape or form. Everyone kind of wants to be able to work together. And so I think the Skills Institute and InnoEnergy as a whole has the ability to be able to bring that together, right? Because people in business are doing their jobs, educators are teaching, government are governing, and so someone has to take that, right? While everyone else is kind of doing their work. You know how, like, sometimes you're at work and you get asked to do another project, and you're like, who's the other person who's going to do the work that I have to, that it's not going to get done while this other major important project is going on? And so the collaboration, I think, is a really great opportunity here to identify specifically what skills do we need to teach? What do people need to know how to do in order to find their path to a meaningful career?
You've worked, in this space for such a long time, and you sound so passionate about it. Firstly, the question is, why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to you as a person in the space that you are able to influence this space, right? Why does it matter?
Right. I mean, I guess I could tell you that I do think the overall mission, that our climate is very important, but and to me personally, you can change the trajectory of someone's life with education and learning. You can change, I need to repeat that. You can change the trajectory of someone's entire life by providing them an opportunity to have a meaningful career and contribute to society in a meaningful way. That's what's important to me.
Wow. I think it's such an important thing you've said there, that these interventions that you make. I mean, you used to see this when I was, with my students, or, when I was working, whether I was working in industry, but the trajectory of their life, right, seems to pivot at the point of your intervention. And I guess for that, you've mentioned about technology, you've talked about, the need for new technologies and the new skills, but from the context of learning and development, what technologies are you seeing that are being used now to support the actual learning itself? So we've got a scenario where we know, okay, we're heading towards this direction. Businesses have said, that, we need more people in this area, right? And we're now going to go and find those people and support them in their careers and the transitions, maybe from a young age, maybe from a career transition point of view. What, in terms of learning design and development, do you see are the things that are changing and that are being more and more utilized to support that future way of learning, you could say?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, it varies at the level of education, how technology is influencing. I mean, I've been working in ed tech for a long time, right? I remember, um, in early 2000s, traveling to Alaska to train teachers how to use to train teachers how to train them. I had to fly there and train them how to use this online platform. Because we didn't have Zoom, and so you would fly there and do it. But they had districts that didn't have the internet, right? And this was early 2000s. This wasn't like the 1950s, right? This wasn't all that long ago. So technology, of course, is changing constantly by leaps and bounds. And just the fact that we can have an online course, that you can take a course online, fully online now. But that's not a panacea. Not everyone. I mean, I think if one thing the pandemic and quarantine showed us is that online education is not necessarily for everyone. Not everyone thrives in that environment. And so what I think technology can do for us is help us meet each learner where they are, right? It doesn't mean that now everyone goes online. It means perhaps this population of learners who thrive in an online environment do that. This population of learners who thrive in a more hands-on, they spend more time there, but that it's equal, right? That not one is getting more attention than the other. So I think that's where technology can help us. I think also, of course, AI and large language databases can help tremendously with helping us parse data, right? Because we get in learning and development, you're collecting a lot of data points. And so you have to have some way to try and, I like to say, to boil the ocean, right? Like, what are the most important skills that people need to know? We're never going to be able to capture all of it. And people are going to have their own personal journeys. But what's the foundational information that people need to know? So, I think there's a lot of opportunity. Technology, of course, helps with scaling. I mean, I remember being a high school English teacher and having a grade book, having to physically write down in a pencil all the grades, and then spending a whole day entering it in at the end of the term. So, I think it makes things go faster, but we also have to not forget to put time into the design. That technology can support design, but design really requires analysis and listening to people.
Excellent. So through your work that you've done, are there any stories that you can share of really making a difference in using technology in some people's lives? The people who haven't been on the sort of a platform where they can share their story. Have you got some of those, I don't know, examples of, people really, a case study almost, of somebody being able to have that, where, as you said, meeting the learner where they are, and then bringing them along, to, where the industry wants them to be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have specific case studies. I have a lot of stories. And one in particular, it's from a long time ago, and I don't know why it's sticking out to me now, but it is. And it's probably because I just talked about the training in Alaska, is that when we would do that training, we were teaching teachers how to use assessment data for instruction. So most people, when they think of taking a test in school, oh my gosh, it's a test. Am I going to pass or fail? What's my grade going to be? My son's going to take the A levels at the end of the day. Oh my God, the A levels and everything. Our whole thing was, okay, yes, and you can also do informal short assessment along the way. So you can individualize instruction for students. And so when we would do that training, we would go in and we would administer an assessment online to teachers, like a fifth grade math assessment, maybe 10 questions. And we would have them take the assessment. And then we would immediately bring a report up that would show by question how every single student did. And then we would show them how you could dive into each question and see and begin to interpret the data to determine, why did every student get question 5 wrong? Is it because they don't know how to add and divide fractions? Or is it because the question's confusing? What's the real reason? And when you would show teachers, granted, now the idea of that is like, yeah, what's the big deal? But back in 2004, 2003, when you would show that capability to teachers, their heads would explode. They would just be like, what? I can find this out. I can simply create, in 5 minutes, I can create an assessment, administer it online to my students, and then make a decision, a database decision about what I need to teach next. And that was, having been a teacher in the classroom, before that existed. I only taught for 2 years, but it was the hardest job I've ever had in my life, teaching high school English. And so being able to have that at your fingertips so quickly, it was awe-inspiring, right? Like to see teachers teachers who've been teaching for 30 years, all of a sudden getting re-energized and excited about technology in the classroom. So, I mean, I don't have these huge studies showing giant gains anywhere, but I like to think at that level, perhaps a teacher went back, and that's what training is teaching people something they can go back and use immediately, right? That's the mark of good training and, in the professional development world. And so the idea that perhaps a teacher would leave that session, go back to their classroom, make a change to the way they did things that helped an individual who otherwise maybe wouldn't have gone on to do something. It just makes you feel better about flying halfway across the country to do teacher trainings.
Well, it's such an important part because obviously the people that are affecting the lives en masse are teachers, right? And if you can support the teachers in the right way, give them the tools, give them the information, make it easier for them, because the teacher's life is not easy, right? By any means. And, if we try to support them, right, in making sure that they are doing individual learning plans, are able to, tailor education to the individuals in their classroom, right, or in their environment. Because, as teachers, we always say that, you're only as good as the weakest student in the class, and you shouldn't be judged you should be supporting them the most. But not an easy thing to do when you're in a classroom by any means, and if we can use technology in that, I've seen it more and more, the technology is being used to be able to support that learning and that individual pathway for individuals. And now we're talking about, like you said, reaching the student where they are, and also the behavior of the learners and the students changing, right? They want different things. They want different gratification. They want to learn in a different way. From a learner's perspective, right? What have you seen change in their behavior in terms of what they expect, from education pathway, and has that changed, and how is that likely to change as we go forward?
Right. It's interesting because I think an easy answer would be to say people now they need shorter learning, right? But I think that's actually always been true, that people, not all people, people are different. That's the difference. We're able to meet people where they are now, and we have the ability to do that. You don't have to have 30 kids sitting in a classroom with a teacher in front, and you don't have to have that for professional development as well. People can kind of take on their own journey. And so, yes, it is nice to have it in smaller chunks. They call it now, it's like real trendy to call it micro learning, like smaller chunks. And some people will like micro learning and do a little bit each day. And some people will sit down and do all 92 micro learnings in one sitting. And that's okay, right? People are going to learn how they learn. And so to me, that's the most important thing. And the interesting thing about making the jump, because I've kind of made the jump from, the K-12 area into higher ed and now more into professional learning and development, which is exciting for me because I bring a lot of business experience as well. And so I often think like, well, when I was higher up at this company, what would I have wanted? What would I have wanted in a training program for the people who report to me? And I think that is something that is changing and becoming more recognized, is that companies are more invested in providing learning and continued professional development within the organization to keep good talent. It's very expensive to replace people. Turnover is extremely expensive for any organization, whether it's at the top or if it's your whole fleet of facilities managers for your commercial real estate enterprise. Every time someone leaves, it's costing you like 10 times what it cost had they not. I made that up, but it's a lot. And so I think that's something that's changing also, is that more organizations and businesses are beginning to realize, hey, I've got these amazing people. If I offer them professional development and continued learning, they might leave and go find some other better job, or they might stay, continue to learn and develop and help the business grow. And so I think we're seeing more of that, more willingness on the business, or not even willingness, just excitement on the business side of things to say, hey, I can provide this for my employees, and just build this learning ecosystem right here where people continue to learn and develop without leave.
And do you think that in the current climate that we're in, or going forward, that has almost become an expectation from a employee's point of view, or like I said, a learner or a student's point of view? Are they expecting this now?
It's funny, I was reading something right before I came here about some report, I can't remember what it was, but they were talking about how Gen Z expects it. I don't remember all the statistics, but they're saying Gen Z expects to continue learning on the job. They expect to be given, they know what's out there. They know, I mean, YouTube is like the greatest experiment. You can learn anything on YouTube, right? If you're willing to go searching for it. And so they're really expecting it. And what the report, I kind of thought the report would go on to say something like, why this might not be good, but why this might not be good, or why it's too hard. But essentially they doubled down and said, and this will be good for everyone. Like, what's good for Gen Z will be good for everyone. Which I thought was exciting, because learning is a lifelong endeavor. Just because you're, in your 50s and you think you're in this job for the rest of your life until you retire, doesn't mean there's something interesting out there for you to learn, or that there's something interesting out there for you to impart, right? It's a really great opportunity for people who have been in industry a long time to contribute to the development of a future workforce. To me, that's the best way to learn, is to ask people who do the job currently, ask them questions like, what do you wish you had known before you started this job? What's the top 3 things you wish you had known before, when you first started? And that's a great way to identify, what do we need to include in trainings in the future, to make sure we equip the people who, it's all about people, right? It's all about people being able to see themselves in a better future, right? And then you just have to, if people can see themselves in the better future, that you've painted this beautiful picture of a future, and then you can support them along the way, then they get there and they generally take other people with them, right? And so it's just this whole momentum of people moving forward, all by learning and technology and pulling it together in bite-sized, manageable chunks for people. That's how you make progress, right? How does the saying go? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Exactly. I think that's such a good way to look at that, in terms of progress, and looking at, well, actually it's infectious in itself, right? And in that ecosystem, if you've got 1, 2, 3, it's gonna go wider, right? And then you're talking about scale, and how you scale, learning, development, skills acquisition, and in effect support an ecosystem around business. And in comparison, now obviously we are in the UK, right? We've got businesses that need skills, and I assume it's a similar across the world effectively. Comparatively, what's happening in the US that you see that maybe the UK could learn from, and maybe vice versa, right? What sort of things have you seen there that are happening in the skills learning development phase? You talked about, the first master's program being put online. We now do, obviously the UK has been done quite everywhere else. But what recent trends have you seen that might be able to share, that you might be able to share from that perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the more recent trends that I've seen, that I kind of already talked about a little bit, was companies, large companies doing training in-house. Now that's a luxury that large companies can generally afford, because it's not inexpensive to endeavor to, say, a 40, 50,000 person company say, okay, we're going to train our entire workforce on sustainability, or, something like that, because they're going to probably want it pretty custom. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity here for not having to do that, right? Chances are that 70, 80% of what you're going to teach in that course that you're in a custom development probably closely matches what this company over here is doing. So it would be ideal if we could share that information and even share resources across the board and share information. That might be, that might be a little rosy-eyed, but I do think that there's more. I think two things are happening. Employees, younger people, and not just younger people, want more professional development and learning opportunities at work. They don't really want to go looking for other jobs. They want to grow and blossom where they are, have that opportunity. And then I think the second thing that's happening is that companies are starting to see this. I think they're going to have to kind of be shown some hard data of why it's good, have some training performance goals, understand that. And then maybe we can take it a step further where people become more open to sharing across the board. It probably won't always be assets because they're expensive. But if we can at least get skills information, like what are the types of things that you did that worked? What are the types of things that resonated with learners that helped you reach your business goals? I mean, because that's ultimately what it is. You want people to feel good about their work, the work they're doing, so that they will be productive, they will be smart, they will show up as their best selves, they will feel like they belong and feel safe. People have to feel safe in order to do good things, right? The whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People have to have those basic needs met. And so I think that's the biggest trend I've seen, is that more companies seem really convinced that this is important. We need to do this. We need to invest in our current employees and our future employees. And I think there's also a move to a greater connection between business and, at least in America, it's starting to grow more. And I think America could learn more from like the UK and Germany about apprenticeships, right? And having these additional paths and having more collaboration between vocational schools and trade schools and business, because everybody deserves a career, a meaningful career, right? And it's like, why are we not working together? You need to hire people. You cannot keep these jobs filled. This whole group of people wants to have a meaningful job and they want to go to school. Let's bring the two together, right? Let's collaborate and change lives.
That's such an important message. So I guess I was going to ask you next, if you had a message to get out there to businesses, right, who, as you said, have now a desire or have brought up in terms of importance these aspects of career development and, training and, building up the right workforces, and it's higher on the agenda. How do they engage with you? How do they engage with, your organization? And what would you say to them to do next? I'm a business out there, an SME. I know how important workforce development is. I just don't know where to start. What do I do, right, as an organization ready to develop my workforce or support others into my organization by means of a career path or skills development? What would your ask be to them, or would your advice be to them to start engaging in a more pragmatic way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the hard work sometimes is not in building the program, right? Like, that's hard work in and of itself, making all the content and doing all the things. It's deciding what needs to go into it. And that's the part where collaboration is key, right? And that's something that InnoEnergy Skills Institute is really invested in and wants to work with businesses in the community to help identify what do you need? And then for us to be able to share, this is what we see, right? Like in a non-threatening, non-competitive way, right? Our conversations with the community, with the business, with the entire industry show that this is what we think the skills are. This is where we think the demand is. We'd love the opportunity to validate that with the business. We don't want to, or I personally am not going to come out here and say I'm an expert in what everyone needs to know. But what I am is a listener, right? And so I want to listen to what the business, what the community, what organization, what government is saying is the need, and make sure that those things align, right? We don't want to build a bunch of content, have a bunch of stuff out there if it's not what people need. So I think that's the really important place to collaborate is what do we need to develop in our employees, not necessarily the actual end result assets, but the focus, because there's a lot out there, right? And it can be overwhelming for a business, for an employee. And so we have to help people. And so what I would encourage businesses to do is to work internally, make a concerted effort to have career paths, right, that people can follow so that they stay, because that's how you build great things, is with people who are really bought in to the mission.
Yeah, and I think that having those goals and, those sort of aspirations are absolutely key. But from yourself, if you're looking forward, right, 3-4 years time, right, and there is I think from the way that you speak, you've got your own visions and goals of what you would like to see happening. What does that look like for you, in terms of, a skills, ecosystem, career ecosystem? What does that look like for you in the future? What would you like to see more of, right? That would be, God, that's where I wanted this to be.
Yeah. It's interesting. We were talking about it back when I was starting my career. I guess it was a little later. I learned about I learned about project management. Like, I didn't know that there was a whole, I think I was in my 30s. By the time I really learned, there was a whole discipline around project management. That there was a PMBOK, that there were standards, that there was a 7-phase process. And I felt like I had landed. I felt like I had landed at home, like, that the mothership had landed in project at PMI. And so I really like frameworks, and I like patterns and getting things organized, right? We could talk about why that is and how my brain works, but essentially I am really big on frameworks and helping people navigate complicated things. And so my vision is that we have a framework, that we have a set of standards. Not only these are the skills that people need to know, but this is the ability to which they need to be able to do them, like a set of standards, right? That was built by all the people I just mentioned: business, industry, education, government, and that becomes a living, breathing framework for what we need to do and how we need to teach the workforce. It's a very, it's a frequently changing technology, right? I mean, it's going to change a lot, so it has to be flexible also. That is what I envision, and that, this sort of, if we build it, they will come. And then people will say, oh, I have training. I have training that works well with that. Oh, I have training that works well with that. And it becomes something like a source of pride. My training aligns to that. I would like to share my training with other people, or I have information that I can share. And so we bring together what is, we used to call it back in the day in the American education system, we called it professional learning communities, PLCs. And that's exactly what it was. It was people who are motivated, right? People who are motivated and interested, bring them together and let's figure out what we need to do, what we need to teach, what are the standards, what do people need to know, what are the career paths, how can we share this, how can we get input from business and build something that changes the trajectory of someone's life.
It's such a great vision to have, this idea that we're supporting community. And if you look at the way a community works, the dynamics of it, you're passing education on, you're supporting others where they need support, but you're also getting support yourself. That idea of a living, breathing, system, right? Where, the whole idea of development becomes everyone's, agenda, but also is flourishing people, in terms of where they were and the journey they end up on, and like you said, changing career paths and entire life just by it's really exciting. And I find that I can hear it in your voice, how important that is to you. And as part of that, we've got some of the work you've been doing, and we talked about this around, not just being there for those that can, but even looking at some of the aspects of those who think they can't, right? And some of the work that you're doing like there around, you mentioned around how do you support somebody who might be blind, or someone that might not have the same, reasons for trying to progress. Can we just talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done there, right? What does that mean? How do you support those people?
Yeah, that's probably a whole series of podcasts, is around that and how technology and different areas, in no way, shape, or form will I claim to be an expert on that. And it continues to be an evolving science as well as, or just evolving pathway, right? Of how do you make sure that everyone has access to the same quality content, the same quality learning. And it is important. It is very important. And I'm not going to minimize the importance of it. But what I am going to say is that we have to be better at it, and we have to be more personalized with it. That there's not going to be a panacea. There's not going to be a one size fits all. But it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's really hard, because when I told you that I love learning, but I didn't really know that until I was older. When I was younger, I just thought I was slow and aggravating, because it took me a long time to do things. And what I realized as an adult is that I just like to go deep, right? And that takes longer than the teacher wanted to. She didn't want me to research for 3 days on certain topics. It was, no, we have to move forward. And so I think we have to listen. It has to be the community, right? But it has to be a community, or people fall through the cracks. And so it's not always, technology is not always the solution, right? Technology can help with process. Technology can help solve problems, but it is not in and of itself a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's a collaboration between, the technology aspects, but really it's about that community that uses the technology in effect to support, but it can't be a one solution fits all. But, so final thoughts then, right? You've put a message out there to, businesses on what they could do to engage. We've talked about, the comparisons of the, what's happening in the US and the UK. We've talked about, some of the technologies that we're using, but a message to, those individuals, right? The real people that we're trying to support in this. What would you like to say to them, right? If they're listening here, what would you like to say to them in terms of engaging with this, engaging with lifelong learning, as you said, and, taking that step to say, that actually the gratification of learning, right, is in itself a goal enough, right? What would you like to say to them? If you had a message for them, individuals sitting at home or listening to this podcast that are in careers that they may not necessarily want to continue in and want to be part of something different, what would you say to them?
You know what I would say, and it just popped into my mind, is ask questions. And it's such an American thing to say. I was just on the phone with someone who's not American and said, if you have any questions, I do hope you'll follow up. And I was like, oh, I'm American. I'll definitely ask questions. And that's what I would say is ask questions. Be curious. Start looking, right? Everybody has the internet now, practically. Open your laptop and start looking. Anything is possible, right? I completely switched. I reinvented myself at 54 and moved to the United Kingdom. And, things are possible and life is short. And so ask questions. Be curious. There's more out there, right? And until you make yourself vulnerable and ask the question and try something, you just won't know. And so that is what I would say. And that to me is also something that's really important in learning. It has to be a safe place. People have to have the ability to fall flat on their face, get up and dust themselves off and start again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing all your insights and valuable experience. It's been a really interesting podcast, and I hope our listeners out there will take on those notes. Businesses will take on some of those notes and keep supporting the communities we're trying to create as part of this. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me on this electrifying episode of Switching On Electrified Skills podcast. Together, we'll shape a future that is powered by electricity. If you would like to learn more about electrification and explore courses and jobs, please visit ershub.co.uk, or connect with us via social media channels. Thank you once again for joining me today. Until next time, keep charging ahead and unleash the full potential of your electrifying skills.